Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere warm, crowded, and definitely not fragrance-free. You're waking up in ancient Rome, more specifically in a creaky, smoky apartment above a bakery. Somewhere near the Subura district. You're on the 5th floor, which sounds like a real estate dream today. But here in 2nd century CE Rome, it mostly means you're poor, tired, and one floor away from the roof collapsing during the next rainstorm. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop your location and local time in the comments now. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You rub your eyes and stretch beneath a scratchy wool blanket. A lopsided wooden shutter lets in the golden haze of sunrise, along with the loud argument of 2 fish sellers in the alley below. The scent that greets you is a heady cocktail, charred bread crusts, animal dung, and the faint whiff of someone nearby boiling cabbage. It's Roman air freshener in its rawest form. You live in an insula, a multi-story apartment block with wooden stairs, shared walls, and very few fire exits. Your neighbor across the hall is snoring. Again, his name might be Lucius, or maybe Marcus. Honestly, you've never asked. He yells in his sleep though, which makes for thrilling nighttime entertainment. There's no kitchen in your flat. Fire risk, which means breakfast is optional and usually not worth the effort. A few dried figs, if you're lucky. Today, you settle for water from the communal fountain down the street, a glorious invention that thankfully hasn't poisoned you, yet you toss on your tunic. Not the nice one, just your everyday number that's halfway between beige and sad. Shoes. Leather sandals that seem to collect more street grime than they protect from. There's a crust of something unidentifiable. Stuck to the strap, you decide to call it historic patina. As you make your way out, the street greets you with its usual early chaos. Carts creak, pigs snort at passersby, and children dart between stalls carrying loaves of bread bigger than their heads. A man is trying to untangle his donkey from a fruit stand. The donkey is winning. Your goal this morning? Reach the forum. Not for politics, no. You don't have time for pompous men in white togas yelling about land reform. You've got errands? Maybe find some work? Maybe just watch other people pretend they're busier than they are? You pass a shrine dedicated to Mercury, the god of travelers and thieves. Convenient combo. Someone's left an offering of honey. Cake, which has already attracted 5 bees and 1 very persistent street cat. The cat eyes you like, you owe it money. Along the way, you overhear a pair of women debating whether the emperor's new statue makes him look more divine or just more constipated. Opinions are split evenly. A child drops a fig on your foot. The fig survives. You do not, emotionally. Finally, you arrive at the forum, the beating heart of Roman public life, except it smells like garlic, sweat, and ambition. Stone columns rise like teeth into the clear sky. Merchants yell their wares. One man is offering authentic Carthaginian incense, which smells suspiciously like goat hair on fire. A philosopher is ranting about the evils of pickled fish, while a drunk soldier nods enthusiastically beside him. Historians still argue whether the forum was more of a civic space or a glorified open-air market. You decide it's both and also. An excellent place to lose a sandal. You take a moment to watch the senators file into the curia, toga ends dragging slightly in the dust. There's a strict code for wearing a toga. You've never mastered it. Frankly, you suspect no one has. At least 3 senators are visibly tripping over themselves. One is wearing his inside out. No one says a word. A street performer nearby balances on a barrel while juggling figs and spouting mildly insulting poetry. He rhymes Brutus with gluteus and earns a small but enthusiastic crowd. You drop in a bronze coin, he bows, and calls you a noble patron of the arts. You feel important for 5 entire seconds, but as you turn to leave, a splatter hits the cobblestones inches from your foot. You look up. A woman on the 3rd floor of a nearby insula is shaking out her laundry and, apparently her chamber pot. You sigh, step carefully around the puddle, and carry on. As the sun climbs higher, the forum grows louder. You start thinking about heading toward the baths. Maybe you'll see what jobs are posted on the Alba, a public notice board. Maybe you'll avoid them altogether and nap in the shade. But for now, you pause on the steps of the Temple of Saturn, squinting up at its still-standing columns. Offerings of coins glint near the base. Pigeons wander like tiny senators. You wonder what Rome might look like in 1,000 years. You head toward the Thermrome's public bathhouses, not because you feel especially unclean, though you are, but because it's where half the city gossips and pretends to work. The nearest one today is the Baths of Titus, smaller than the Baths of Caracalla, but closer and less likely to host a group of toga-clad philosophers, arguing about ethics in the hot room as you weave through the streets, avoiding stray dogs and the occasional wildly off-course cart. The smells shift from bakery ash to something more ... herbal. The bathhouse is near, and with it comes the heady scent of oils, sweat, and that weird blend of rosemary and regret that clings to most Roman bathers. At the entrance, you're greeted by a gatekeeper who probably takes his job far too seriously. You toss him a small coin and step inside. First stop, the appetiterium, the changing room. There are no lockers, just shelves and hope. You undress, tucking your tunic between a statue's legs for safekeeping. No one ever said Roman security was sophisticated. You wrap a towel well, a glorified strip of linen, round your waist, and shuffle forward with the rest of the morning crowd. The walls are painted in flaking reds and ochres, faded nymphs cavorting between olive trees. The air is thick, heavy, and steamy, like someone tried to boil a perfume shop. You start in the tepidarium, the warm room. It's cozy like a terracotta oven. You lie back on a stone bench and the warmth seeps into your spine. Across from you, an old man is loudly explaining the healing properties of pigeon droppings. He swears by it. You nod. Slowly inching away, historians still debate how sanitary these bathhouses really were. The water was changed regularly. Yes, but the pools were shared by dozens, sometimes hundreds. Also, Romans weren't big on soap. Instead, they used oil rubbed all over the body, then scraped off with a curved metal tool called a strigil. It works, sort of, if your definition of clean is slightly less oily than before. You head to the caldarium, the hot room. It hits you like a wall of steam. The floor is heated by a hypocaustan underfloor furnace system so clever, it makes modern central heating look like a damp sock. You sit on a bench and immediately regret it. It's like sitting on the surface of the sun. Men around you slap. Their skin groan or hum softly. A boy walks past carrying a pitcher of olive oil and a tray of bread. You suspect he's eating his tips. You lie back and breathe deeply, steam curling in your nostrils. It's relaxing until a strigil technician, Reed, a very cheerful man with strong opinions about your skin, approaches. He slathers you in warm oil, rubs it into your shoulders, and then begins scraping. Hard. It's like being exfoliated with a butter, knife wielded by someone angry at your ancestors. As flakes of skin, dust, and questionable oils are removed, you remind yourself, this is supposed to be enjoyable. Beside you, a merchant is complaining that his latest amphora shipment was delayed by a lazy mule. Another man is trying to flirt with a woman who's clearly pretending not to hear him over the sound of water dripping from the caldarium. Shuffle into the frigidarium, the cold plunge. It's shocking. Like falling into a mountain spring with your eyes open and your dignity frozen. You gasp, try not to yelp, and immediately develop a deep respect for ancient Roman resilience. Cold jolts you awake. You feel cleaner, maybe even sharper. Your hair's a mess, but your pores are probably terrified into behaving. After drying off with a piece of linen that has all the absorbency of a wet napkin, you retrieve your tunic still perched awkwardly on that statue. It now has a small footprint on it, courtesy of some child who climbed the pedestal to poke the statue's nose. You redress and head to the palestra, the gymnasium attached to the baths. You're not here to work out gods. No, but it's fun to watch others attempt exercise that involves more grunting than movement. Like a pair of men slap each other with sandbags, and one very wiry gentleman is attempting a form of wrestling that mostly resembles slow dancing with elbows. You catch snippets of gossip. Word is, a senator's wife has been spotted at the theater without her veil. Scandalous. Someone else claims the emperor's hairpiece fell off during a religious procession. A third voice swears they saw a fish seller pay for a feast using cursed dice. It's all hearsay and absolutely riveting. You remember? You still haven't eaten anything substantial today? Your stomach rumbles like a minor volcanic tremor. Someone offers you a bite of libum, a soft cheese bread drizzled with honey. Tastes like ambrosia, if ambrosia were slightly undercooked and dropped once in sand. As you sit back under a pergola, sipping watered-down wine that's 80% water, and 20%, well, it's red, you realize something. This is probably the cleanest you'll feel all week. And somehow, the noisiest bathhouse in Rome is still more peaceful than your apartment. Before you leave, a man tries to sell you a used strigil. He claims it once belonged to a famous gladiator. You decline, but thank him for his bold imagination. You step back into the sunlight, skin gleaming, hair slightly damp, and tunic suspiciously clingy in all the wrong places. The city welcomes you back with a blast of heat and a cartload of geese trying to cross the road. The day isn't over yet. You've still got coin to earn, or at least pretend to. But for now, your limbs feel a little looser, your brain a little foggier, and your heart just relaxed enough to enjoy the chaos around you. You're freshly oiled, marginally cleaner, and mildly hungry, which means it's time to do what most Romans without stable income do: wander around pretending to be productive. Finding consistent work in ancient Rome is less of a career path and more of an elaborate improv performance. Luckily, you've perfected the art of looking busy. You drift toward the marketplace, where job opportunities range from possibly lucrative to definitely humiliating. The Forum Holatorium, Rome's produce market, is already teeming with hopefuls. One man offers to carry cabbages for a denarius. Another is yelling about his unmatched skills in onion peeling. It's competitive out here. Your first stop is a fish sauce vendor. Not to buy. Gods know the smell alone could end friendships. But he sometimes needs help loading amphorae, those big clay jugs filled with the liquid guts of fermented fish, known as garum. The ancient Romans used garum like modern influencers use truffle oil lavishly, and with great enthusiasm. You help hoist a jug into his cart. In return, he gives you a slice of salted bread and a half-hearted thanks. Your hands now smell like Poseidon's armpit. You try not to touch your face. Historians still argue whether garum was genuinely delicious or simply proof that Roman taste buds were forged in fire. There's even archaeological evidence that luxury blends of the stuff were branded, bottled, and traded like expensive cologne. Imagine gifting someone fish sauce for their birthday and watching them weep with joy. You keep moving toward a cluster of performers. Rome is filled with informal entertainers, jugglers, musicians, and one man who insists he's a historical reenactor, even though no one asked. Today's lineup includes a dancing goat and a boy who recites love poetry with his eyes closed. You consider joining, maybe beatboxing with a piece of wood, but decide your dignity is worth something. Just not much. Around the corner, you spot a woman selling good luck charms. One of them is a tiny bronze phallus on a chain. She winks. For fertility and fortune, she says. You raise an eyebrow. Mostly fortune, she adds quickly. Your next attempt at employment takes you toward a man calling for mourners. You follow him to a nearby house where someone important, wealthy, who knows has just passed away. In Rome, professional mourners are a thing. Loud grief was considered honorable, and nothing says sorrow like being paid to wail on command. You're handed a dark cloak and told to look devastated, so you furrow your brow, clutch your chest dramatically, and unleash a guttural AI that turns a few heads. The deceased's cousin glares at you, but a small boy in the back claps. You take the win. Afterward, you're paid in a chunk of cheese and a pat on the shoulder. Consider this a net gain. You wander past a group of scribes, 4 higher literate folks, who write letters for those who can't. One of them is halfway. through a breakup scroll dictated by a particularly bitter woman who's shouting the phrases she wants included. Tell him he's as exciting as stale barley, she bellows. The scribe shrugs and keeps writing. You almost ask if they need a helper, but your handwriting is ... interpretive at best. Still, it's tempting. These folks make a decent living putting ink to papyrus and pretending not to judge. Next, you spot a man selling tiny amphorae of perfume-cheap stuff made from crushed herbs, wine sediment, and dreams. You offer to help drum up business, he agrees, and you spend half an hour chasing distracted passers-by yelling, "Smell like Venus," after a rainstorm. No one buys anything, but he gives you a tiny vial for effort. It smells like wet time. In ambition, you also spot a group of delivery runners teenagers, mostly zipping around the city, delivering messages for coin. They're nimble, loud, and entirely uninterested in a job that involves slow walking and heavy sandals. One of them nearly knocks over a statue while trying to balance 3 scrolls and a goat. One of your oddest prospects appears just before midday. A man claims he needs someone to impersonate his cousin at a family dinner. No speaking required, just nodding solemnly and laughing at jokes. He's been dead for 2 weeks, the man says casually. You just haven't told Aunt Livia. You, is politely decline. By now, you've scraped together a small, unimpressive handful of coins. Enough for lunch, maybe. You think back to the professional mourners and wonder if wailing in public is your true calling. You do have a flair for the dramatic, after all. On your way back, toward the center, you pass a couple of street-side sketch artists. One is drawing a heroic image of a man standing victoriously over a pile of geese. It's unclear if this is based on real events or goose-related trauma. The artist notices you looking and offers to sketch your portrait for 2 asses. You laugh and say you're too beautiful for marble. Rome is a city of hustles, some small, some just loud. There's work to be found if you don't mind the occasional goat chase, oil stain, or mystery payment in cheese. Historians still debate the full scope of Roman employment for the lower classes, especially non-citizens. Jobs shifted with the seasons, the emperor's whims, and whether or not the aqueduct was leaking that week. You didn't always get to pick your path. Sometimes it picked you, handed you a jug of fish sauce, and said, "Try not to drop this." As you head toward a shady spot to rest your legs, you spot something glinting on the ground, and old coin, maybe. No, just a very flat fig. Still, your heart skips for a moment. Treasure hunting in Rome is less about gold and more about avoiding pigeon droppings while dreaming of improbable luck. You sit, lean against a sun-warmed wall, and let the clamor of the marketplace melt into background noise. There's always more to do, more to try, more odd jobs around every corner. But for now, your rest, your hands still smelling faintly of fish sauce, your tunic crumpled from mourning, and your pockets heavy with nearly worthless coin. And maybe a tiny bronze phallus, for fortune, obviously. Your legs are rested, kind of, and your coin pouch jingles faintly with the weight of your morning's random exploits. That is, until you remember how fast that coin will vanish once Rome's less glamorous necessities come calling. As the sun climbs higher, the streets become even more chaotic, if that's possible. Morning carts have turned into midday traffic jams. Rome didn't have traffic lights, but it sure had traffic. Mule carts stacked with amphorae squeak and groan through the narrow alleys. Market-goers argue over stale olives. A man is yelling about his lost chicken, which, let's be honest, probably left Rome entirely by now. The air is thick with dust and the scent of hot stone. You cough politely as someone brushes past you carrying a large sack that, judging by the smell, contains either garlic or mild vengeance. A cat darts under a vendor's stall. You make way for a cluster of toga wearers bumping into each other like slow-moving clouds of linen. Togas, let's talk about them. You are not wearing one, thank Jupiter. The toga was more than just clothing. It was a symbol of citizenship, masculinity, and social status. It was also, by all accounts, wildly inconvenient. Just a giant wool sheet, artfully draped and held in place by equal parts, experience and fear of public embarrassment. Historians still argue whether the average Roman actually wore their toga correctly, or if they all just faked it and hoped no one noticed. Either way, you've seen more than one man trip over his own hem while trying to appear dignified. Today, someone's toga has definitely betrayed them. A young man clearly new at this, is frantically trying to redrape his garment after it. Slips off one shoulder, flaps like a wounded bird as he spins in circles. You offer a sympathetic nod. You've been there. Meanwhile, an older gentleman adjusts his tunicula interior. The undershirt of his formal toga ensemble while berating his slave for bringing the wrong shade of toga candida. This bleached white version is traditionally worn by political candidates, and judging by the tomato sauce stain near the hem, his chances of winning public favor have plummeted. Further down the street, the ground squelches beneath your sandals. That's not a good sign. You glance upward. Sure enough, someone has emptied a chamber pot from their third-story window. It's an unfortunate Roman tradition, gravity-assisted waste disposal. There's a rule technically requiring a warning. Shout cave, but no one follows it. You sidestep, narrowly avoiding a very wet disaster. Trash collection in Rome is more of a suggestion than a system. While wealthier areas have designated collectors, much of the refuse just ends up in the streets or swept into the Tiber if you're feeling lazy. The smell ranges from mildly earthy to what died and fermented. Still, the city somehow endures. The noise, the mess, the crowds, it all pulses with energy. You pass a fountain where a few children splash water on their feet, while a weary fruit seller uses the basin to wash figs that probably weren't clean to begin with. A stray dog follows you for a while. You're not sure if it wants food or friendship, maybe both. Eventually, it gets distracted by a dropped piece of goat cheese and vanishes. You stop near a public announcement board, a slab of wood nailed to a wall with wax tablets and parchments, pinned up for passersby. One poster advertises a new play at the Theater of Pompey. Another announces a runaway slave. Someone else is offering a reward for the return of a missing parrot. Yes, even in ancient Rome, birds ran the show. You spot a note about a communal street cleanup, but the date has been scratched out and replaced with maybe next month. As you press forward, you get caught in what can only be described as a pedestrian vortex. Too many bodies, not enough road. Your shoulder brushes a soldier in full armor who grunts something about being late for a sacrifice. A matron with a basket of onions hisses at you for stepping on her shadow. You apologize, even though you're not entirely sure that was a crime. Rome's urban planning is ambitious. Streets twist unpredictably, some barely wide enough for two carts to pass without a wheel incident. Occasionally, you'll pass a magnificent marble archway, only to immediately stumble into a dead-end alley filled with laundry and one deeply suspicious goose. You try to take a shortcut through a narrow side street, only to be stopped by a pair of arguing shopkeepers. One is claiming the other stole his chicken coop design. Argument escalates quickly. You back out slowly. Eventually, you reach a small plaza where you catch your breath and try to shake the dust from your sandals. You lean against a column, watching a group of boys chasing each other with sticks.
Oh, one pretends to be a gladiator. The other insists he's Neptune.
You briefly consider being a tree, just to avoid being tackled. A man selling bread pastries walks by, his tray balanced expertly on his head. You buy one with the last of your change. It gets dry and slightly burned, but you're not picky. Crumbs stick to your tunic. You brush them off and wonder whether that job impersonating someone's dead cousin might have come with better food. Just as you begin to feel the heat taking its toll, you spot a makeshift awning stretched over a stall shade. You sit beneath it and breathe in the faint scent of pine resin from the nearby carpenter's shop. A woman passes, carrying a jar of perfume oil. She's talking to herself, muttering something about needing more lavender to mask the stench of goat again. You don't know if she's a vendor or simply very committed to personal scent warfare. Historians still argue whether Rome's famously filthy streets were balanced by equally impressive efforts at public works, aqueducts, fountains, and sewers like the Cloaca Maxima were engineering marvels but they couldn't fight off the daily tide of filth and flying chamber pots. You close your eyes for a moment. The sounds of the city washing over you, shouting. Vendors, clattering carts, distant flute music, someone yelling that their toga's on fire. Again, you take a deep breath, tasting dust and cinnamon. It's overwhelming, loud, and utterly Roman, and somehow you love it. Your stomach makes a quiet, embarrassing noise, part protest, part suggestion. Despite the dried-out pastry earlier, you're now properly hungry, and as the Roman sun begins its slow descent, you realize it's time to face one of the most intimate aspects of life in the eternal city, the public toilet. You head toward a nearby latrina, tucked between a taberna and what looks like a very aggressive statue of Mars. Public toilets in Rome weren't hidden away or shamefully whispered about. They were social hubs in their own odd way. Long marble or stone benches, perforated with holes, lined the walls. Beneath them, a water channel continuously flushed waste away, sort of. You step inside and immediately regret inhaling through your nose. The scent is something between warm anchovy paste and die-old festival wine. A few patrons glance up as you enter, nodding casually. Everyone here is just going about their business in every sense. You pick an empty spot and sit no doors. It's no dividers, just a line of strangers sharing the same bodily agenda. You shift uncomfortably on the cold stone. A man next to you chuckles softly. "First time?" he asks. You nod. He gestures to a corner where a stick with a sponge attached rests in a communal bucket of vinegar water. The Tersorium Rome's multi-use toilet paper substitute. You hesitate. You decide this might be a just don't think too hard kind of moment. As you sit, you overhear some juicy gossip. The woman to your left is muttering to her companion about a senator's scandal involving a cursed fig tree and someone's missing husband. You make a mental note to never trust a fig again. Toilets were prime gossip territory.
Oh.
In a city where people lived so close together, any sliver of privacy became an unfiltered confessional. The latrina was not only where you relieved yourself, was where information flowed just as freely. Historians still argue whether people actually used these spaces primarily for socializing or if the gossiping just became inevitable over time. Some claim that graffiti found near ancient toilets complaints. Jokes, poetry, even political slogans suggests people lingered far longer than necessity required. As you leave, one of the men offers you a friendly pat on the back and says, "Watch your step on the way out, someone missed." You nod in silent horror. Once outside, you realize you've wandered near one of the city's more sacred areas, where temples, small shrines, and little street altars blend seamlessly into daily life. You follow a trail of rose petals to a small alcove with a statue of Venus, adorned with necklaces and offerings of bread. You pause, considering whether you should leave something. You dig into your tunic and find half a dried fig. It'll do. Just beyond the shrine, a man stands by. A small wooden crate. On top sits a rather fat and extremely calm chicken. The man waves you over and points proudly at the bird. "She's never wrong," he says. "You got a question?" You blink. Apparently you've just stumbled into a divination service chicken-based fortune-telling. A real Roman practice rooted in augury and haruspicy. Romans believed in signs from the gods, whether through the patterns of bird flight or the behavior of animals during feeding. Military commanders especially took these omens seriously. Some refused to engage in battle if the sacred chickens weren't pecking in the right direction. You whisper, "Will I find stable work soon?" The man tosses a handful of grain. The chicken pecks slowly, deliberately, and then wanders in a lazy circle before sitting down and pooping on the crate. The man shrugs. Could go either way. You thank the bird and back away carefully. You've learned never to ignore poultry with mystical clout. The crowd around you has thickened again. This time in anticipation of a procession. A small group of priests in pointed hats walk by, chanting softly and shaking bundles of herbs. They trail incense smoke, which briefly masks the usual city stench. Behind them, a few barefooted women carry statues of minor deities, Lares and Penates, household gods who get fewer festivals but more everyday prayers. You watch a child sneak a small sweet into the hands of one statue, whispering for good dreams. Your heart softens a bit. As you move with the crowd, you catch sight of a painted sign for a Pepina Roman tavern. It's too early for dinner, but not too early for wine, or at least Roman wine, which is often sour and diluted, and sometimes spiced into something nearly potable. You step inside. The tavern is dim, the air thick with smoke and laughter. Patrons drink from simple ceramic cups and argue about chariot racing teams. You overhear someone insisting that the greens are cursed this season because a goat ran across the track during the last race. Superstition runs deep here. You sip a thin, vinegary red and chew on olives, too salty to be accidental. The barkeep leans over and says, "That one's a week old age to perfection," with a wink. A few men gamble with dice at a nearby table, slapping them down with exaggerated flair. One accuses the other of using tail-weighted knucklebones meant to cheat. A brief scuffle breaks out and ends just as quickly. You finish your drink and slip back outside before anyone tries to recruit you for their amateur gladiator league. The sunlight has softened. Shadows lengthen. And your earlier snack has long since left you hungry again. You pass a street vendor selling poles, sort of barley porridge, and grilled fish wrapped in fig leaves. It smells better than it looks. You take a portion of the barley and burn your tongue instantly, which is historically accurate. As you eat, you spot a group of young women walking together, carrying baskets of flower petals and small figurines. One of them waves at you and offers a laurel sprig. You tuck it behind your ear. Why not? You think about how much you've already experienced today, the bodily rituals of a shared toilet. Prophetic poultry, sun-baked streets of marble and filth. You've inhaled more smoke, sweat, and incense than should be legal. Your feet ache. Your togaless tunic is slightly stained, and you're pretty sure you've just been blessed, cursed, and propositioned, all in the same plaza. Rome may be dirty, crowded, and chaotic, but it never ever is boring. You blink twice, wondering if the laurel sprig has mystical side effects. Because as you shuffle along the uneven cobblestones, you suddenly find yourself following the sound of rhythmic clucking. Not an ordinary chicken sound. No, this is the coordinated, ceremonial cluck of Rome's most underrated religious consultants. The augurs and their prophetic poultry. You trail behind a small group of robed augurs. Men trained in the ancient Etruscan practice of reading omens from birds both, their behavior and flight patterns. But today, they're not watching the skies. Today, it's all about the birds on the ground. In a small clearing just off a temple courtyard, a circle forms. At its center sits a portable coop filled with white hens. You lean against a column, curious. The lead augur steps forward, scatters a handful of sacred grain, and watches intently. As the chickens respond, there's murmuring, scribbling on wax tablets, nods and worried glances. You quietly ask someone nearby, "What's going on?" She whispers, "They're checking if it's a good day for a public vote." If the chickens eat messily, it's a yes. You watch as one hen takes a dramatic pause, flaps her wings, pecks the grain like she's auditioning for a dinner theater show. Apparently that's a good sign. Rome, where your political future hinges on the mealtime enthusiasm of a chicken. Historians still argue whether this kind of augury was just for show or if people truly placed serious faith in it. But Roman generals, emperors, and even common folk deferred to birds more than to logic. You start to feel bad for pigeons. No one ever asked their opinion. With the omens favorable, people relax. A few children toss extra grain to the hens. One bird looks directly at you and blinks slowly. A warning? Compliment? You'll never know. You leave the courtyard and wander into a quieter neighborhood, where shrines to household gods decorate nearly every corner. Small, clay statues of Lares and Penates, protectors of the home, sit perched atop little altars with candle drippings and stale bread offerings. One even has a child's drawing propped behind its stick figures, a wolf, and what you think might be a very wobbly aqueduct. A few steps further, and the scenery shifts again.
Ow!
The buildings are grander, the marble cleaner, and the silence thicker. You've arrived in the district of the wealthy elite, where the Damas private homes stand, as quiet monuments to status. You're not invited inside. You do pass one large open door and can't help peeking in. A servant eyes you but doesn't shoo you away. Inside the atrium, a mosaic of Neptune sparkles in sunlight streaming from a skylight.
Ash.
Water drips into a central basin, filling the air with that strange Roman blend of elegance and mildew. You catch sight of a man lounging on a couch, dictating a letter to a scribe. His feet are being scrubbed by someone kneeling beside him. This is Roman luxury. Quiet, controlled, and distinctly hierarchical. You keep moving, only to be flagged down by someone else entirely. A sweaty man with ink-stained fingers and an exhausted-looking donkey beside him. You look strong, he says. Want to help? Me copy some tax records? You politely decline. Your path leads you next to a small gathering outside a school. You pause, listening to the drone of a teacher's voice reciting Latin grammar rules. A handful of boys, wrapped in togas that keep falling off their shoulders, chant back with varying levels of enthusiasm. One of them, clearly bored, is drawing something crude on a wax tablet. You make eye contact. He winks. You pretend not to notice. Education in Rome was intense, especially for boys from well-off families. Rhetoric, logic, poetry, history, and an unspoken competition, to quote Cicero. The fastest. Girls often learned at home, but wealthy women could sometimes attend lectures or hire private tutors. You wonder how many of these children will grow up to become senators or chicken consultants. You meander onward past a row of shops selling everything from bronze trinkets to questionable fish sauce. One particularly aggressive vendor offers you a deal on a blessed statuette of Mercury. You ask, "How do I know it's really blessed?" He answers, "It hasn't caught fire." Yet, you pass by now, your sandals are dust-caked, and your back is sore from pretending to have posture. You duck into the shade of a colonnade, rubbing your temples. A little old woman appears beside you, offering a small pouch of something that smells like lavender and goat hair. "Good for dreams," she says cryptically. You buy it out of fear. The next few moments are disjointed a musician strumming an ancient stringed instrument while balancing on one foot. A group of teens, machristling, in front of a gymnasium and a bored-looking guard trying to shoo a cat off a statue of Julius Caesar. The cat wins. In a quieter alley, a young man crouches beside a turtle. He tells you the turtle has prophetic powers. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. It's Rome. Everything's prophetic if you believe hard enough. You take a deep breath. The smells of incense, urine, figs, roasted nuts, and fresh bread compete in your nose. It's not pleasant. But it's not entirely unpleasant either, like a cologne made by someone nostalgic for public festivals and old books. Suddenly, the sky darkens just slightly. Not enough for night, but enough to tell you the afternoon is deepening. A light wind stirs the fabric of your tunic, bringing with it a whisper of the Tiber River's muddy breath. You realize you haven't seen the river yet today. That might be a blessing. Someone bumps into you and mumbles an apology. You glance down. It's a small boy carrying a clay lamp shaped like a lion's head. "For my father," he says. He's afraid of the dark. You smile and step aside. Above you, an apartment window slams shut, and someone curses in Latin. That even you understand. A loaf of bread falls from another balcony, lands beside your foot, and is immediately snatched by a passing dog. You begin to think the gods are watching, or at least laughing. You continue down a twisting lane, lined with faded frescoes and sun-cracked walls, each step bringing you deeper into the realm of Roman status, the complex, ever-performative world of who owns what, who wears what, and who gets to sit where. You're about to find out that in Rome, knowing your place wasn't just a social skill, it was a survival strategy. At first, it's subtle. You pass a man riding a litter carried by 4 burly slaves, his toga dyed ever so slightly purple, not imperial purple, which would have gotten him executed for impersonation. But a shade ambitious enough to say, "I have friends in the Senate." His sandals are soft leather, his beard expertly trimmed. He's eating grapes like he invented them. You accidentally make eye contact. He does not blink. You blink for both of you. Wealth in Rome is a moving target.
Oh.
Their senatorial class, equestrian class, plebeians, freedmen, slaves, and 100 invisible gradations in between. You, at this point, fall into the wandering observer who smells slightly of goat category. Respectable, but not exactly invitation-worthy still. You must look harmless, because a well-dressed woman waves you over from her shaded portico. She's holding a peacock feather fan and sipping what appears to be watered-down wine. "You there?" she calls. "Come meet my new doorkeeper. He's from Britannia and has never seen a proper Roman street fight." That's a strange sales pitch, but you step forward. The doorkeeper is indeed from Britannia, tall, freckled, and looking bewildered as to street vendors argue over the ownership of a half-squashed melon. One vendor holds a knife, the other a sandal. You and the Brit exchange a nod. You've both seen weirder. Inside the courtyard, the woman gestures to her decor mosaic floors, marble busts, a trickling fountain shaped like a nymph spitting water into a fish's mouth. "All real," she says. "Well, except the bust of Cicero. It's actually my ex-husband." She cackles. "This home is run not just by wealth, but by appearance. The marble, the slaves, the expensive perfume, and the air all part of the carefully curated message. I am important, and I know it." A servant approaches with figs and honey cakes. Take one and pretend to nibble like someone raised in refinement. Tastes like debt. While lounging, you overhear the woman discussing which of her slaves she might manumit soon. In Rome, a slave could sometimes be freed and become a freedman or freedwoman, still marked by status but allowed to work, marry, and even accumulate wealth. Many freedmen went on to become absurdly rich merchants. One even built a house bigger than a senator's and was later politely shunned for doing so. Historians still debate. The woman muses whether freedmen marrying into old patrician families was scandalous or just efficient. She takes a long sip and adds, "My second husband was a freedman, the best kisser I ever had." You take a mental note not to comment. Leaving. The courtyard behind you wander into a domus, under construction, half-finished columns. Workers shouting, and dust clinging to your eyelashes. A young architect, excited to explain his vision, traps you in a monologue about atriums and pluviums, and why this kind of column was totally out of fashion last year. You smile, nod, and try not to sneeze. One of the workers, shirtless and sunburned, offers you a skin of water and says, "You look like you've seen too much marble today." He's not wrong. Walking again, you spot a small group of upper-class teenagers surrounded by their tutors. They're reciting Virgil, misquoting Cicero, and arguing over whether Hercules or Achilles had the better beard. One points at you and asks if you're a philosopher. You say no. He says that's what a philosopher would say. Touche, at the far edge of this elite district lies a peculiar scene, a row of tombs, elaborately decorated and well-maintained, lining a quiet road. Romans weren't allowed to bury the dead inside city limits, so roads leading in and out of Rome were flanked with family tombs, each one a billboard for posterity. You pause in front of one statue, an older man holding hands with a younger woman. The inscription reads, "He freed her, then married her." She corrected his Latin. You can't help but smile. Next to that is a tomb built like a small house, complete with seating and an awning. A family is picnicking on the roof of their ancestors' final resting place. This isn't morbid, it's Roman. Death and legacy were part of everyday life. You wonder what kind of tomb you'd get. Probably one shaped like a confused chicken. The air turns cooler as you drift downhill. You find yourself among smaller homes and apartments, where life is louder and smells are stronger. A family argues over olive oil. Young girl sings while feeding geese. Someone is loudly practicing flute, poorly. Here people wear simpler tunics, some mended several times. You pass a woman sewing on her stoop and hear her mutter, "These senators get silk, and I get goat spit." She notices you listening and laughs. "Don't worry, you're not one of them. You look too tired." You thank her, probably. By now, the sun is hanging low in the sky, casting long shadows across the rooftops. People begin lighting lamps, with flint and small oil reservoirs. One flickers to life beside you, revealing a shop window full of bronze trinkets, keys, brooches, dice, and tiny statues of Venus. The shopkeeper nods toward a pair of dice and says, "Lucky," or "cursed." Depends who you ask. You don't ask. Across the street, a group of women sit in a circle, spinning wool and gossiping. You catch phrases like he said it was a comet, but it was clearly smoked from his firewood, and she wore her stola. Backwards again. Scandalous. You realize gossip in Rome is timeless and possibly a civic duty. As night creeps in, candles flicker in upper-story windows, and the sounds of liars and laughter drift down to the street. The city doesn't sleep yet. Not really, but it changes. The daytime clamor gives way to the low murmur of dinner preparations. The clinking of ceramic cups, and the occasional argument over whose goat is blocking the stairwell. You find a bench and sit, the wood warm from the day's sun. Above you, laundry lines sway gently in the breeze, togas and tunics flapping like sleepy flags. Somewhere in the distance, a flute finally hits a pleasant note. You applaud softly. You've moved through the layers of Roman society today from soaring wealth to everyday resilience. What you've learned is this: Rome wasn't built in a day, but it sure knows how to show off every single hour of one. The last sliver of sun slips behind a row of uneven rooftops, casting the Roman street in the kind of warm, amber glow that makes even the gutters look like they've been touched by the gods. You step lightly now, your legs tired, but your curiosity unshaken. There's still one layer of the social onion left to peel, Roman women. You duck into a shaded alley where a trio of women sit under a vine-covered archway, their hands busy with threads and dyes. One is embroidering a stola long draped dress, worn by Roman women of status, with tiny red fish. Another is picking lice out of her daughter's hair with a bronze comb that looks disturbingly efficient. The third, a sharp-eyed woman with laugh lines and a haughty tilt to her chin, says, "You want to know how women really lived? Sit down, don't touch anything, and definitely don't breathe on the silk." You do as you're told. To be a woman in ancient Rome was to live with limitations, lots of them. Legally, you couldn't vote, hold office, or wear a toga unless you wanted to be mistaken for a prostitute. And yet women wielded influence in subtler, slipperier ways through fashion, family, rumor, clever workarounds. The woman holds up a shimmering piece of imported silk, whispered in and dyed a rich violet. "Illegal," she says smugly. "Only senators can wear purple. But if you line the inside of your sleeves, who's going to arrest you? The fashion police?" She's not joking. There were actual sumptuary rules on who could wear what, eat what, and even how many guests you could host. Historians still argue whether these laws were about morality or just economic jealousy, she adds, trimming a hem with a small knife shaped like a dolphin. You're handed a length of fabric and told to help fold. You try, fail, and are politely asked to stop. "Your hands are too sweaty," someone whispers. The topic turns to Roman hairstyles, true battlegrounds of fashion and status. The latest trend apparently involves elaborate curls piled high, with beeswax and fixed in place with as many hairpins as humanly possible. Last week, a woman's hair collapsed during a funeral, one says, suppressing laughter, knocked over the urn. You learn that a woman's hair wasn't just decorative, was symbolic. Unbound hair could suggest mourning madness or freedom. A tightly bound braid might hint at obedience or modesty. And wigs, extremely popular, especially among elite women who imported blonde hair from Germania and red curls from the Celts. "You'd look good in a wig," someone tells. You, one with curls. You have a forehead for curls. You take it as a compliment. As dusk deepens, the conversation takes a more serious turn. One woman, older and quieter, speaks of how most Roman women married young by today's standards. Too young. They were expected to bear children, run a household, and remain above suspicion. A tall order, considering the gossip you've heard today alone, but they also managed businesses, owned property, and manipulated inheritance laws in ways that would make any lawyer today sweat through his robe. One particularly famous woman, you're told, wrote her own will and left her estate to her slaves. Her family sued. She won. Twice. This, too, is Rome, where women weren't allowed in politics, but could reshape the economy from the inside out. You excuse yourself and continue down the street, passing by a row of tailors working by candlelight. One woman is stitching what looks like a wedding tunic. She hums while she works, then pauses to sprinkle perfume into the fabric, a mixture of rose water and something that smells suspiciously like goat. You don't ask. Outside a small bookshop, two young women are reading aloud to one another, giggling every few lines. You glance at the cover. It's poetry, probably Ovid, love poems, thinly veiled as metaphors for farming tools. One woman catches your eye and says, "Want to hear a line about shovels that's definitely not about shovels?" You decline. Barely. A few blocks down, you stumble upon a woman painting tiny gods onto clay lamps. Mercury, with his winged shoes. Venus reclining like she owns the joint. Minerva, armed and judging. Men buy these for protection, she says, dabbing on gold leaf. Women buy them for revenge. You believe her. In the forum, you spot a political rally winding down. Men stand on crates shouting half-hearted slogans. But just beyond them, in the shadow of a statue of Livia, wife of Augustus, and whisper queen of Rome, circle of women debate inheritance law with more heat than the entire Senate. One woman slams a scroll down and says, "If he divorces me, he can keep the villa, but I keep the mosaic of Neptune." A fair split, you think? Historians still debate. Another chimes in whether Livia poisoned half her enemies, or just outlived them naturally. You make a note never to accept figs from someone named Livia. As darkness settles in, the city shifts again. Women disappear indoors, shutters close, and courtyards fill with soft laughter and the clink of dinnerware. In the window above you, a grandmother tells bedtime stories to her grandkids, tales of nymphs. Heroes and kitchen ghosts that steal your bread if you don't clean your dishes. You pass one final home, where a group of women share a meal under the stars. They wave you over, but you decline, your bellies full of honey cakes, fish sauce, fumes, and cultural amise. As you walk away, one of them calls out, "Tell the world Roman women weren't just wives and mothers. You're schemers, dreamers, fashionistas, and occasionally murderers." You raise a hand in agreement, and then, as a cool breeze stirs the laundry above you, you wonder, what parts of your time will someone whisper about 2,000 years from now? Hopefully not the cargo shorts. The moon climbs higher as you wander toward the marketplace, where the air is a chaotic stew of smells: roasted chickpeas, warm olives, old fish, and just a whisper of donkey sweat. Roman markets don't exactly shut down at dusk. They simply change character. Shouting fades, replaced by murmurs and flickering oil lamps. This is when the curious and sometimes questionable deals happen. You edge into a stall selling dried herbs, figs, and something the sign cheerfully calls wine of rodents. It's a vendor, a man missing to teeth and all sense of boundaries, leans in. "That, very medicinal," he says, winking. "Aged with fermented mouse. Very rare. Very helpful for digestion." You pretend you didn't hear the last part. Mouse wine was indeed a thing, you recall with queasy clarity. It was used in small doses to cure all manner of ill stomach aches, gout, and maybe bad decision-making. Historians still argue whether it was truly effective or just an elaborate dare passed down through generations. You nod politely and move along. The marketplace offers more than food, of course. You pass a table displaying tiny marble statues, gods, emperors, and one extremely chiseled gladiator, who looks like he knows it. Another stall sells bird-shaped oil lamps, handmade shoes, and a small bronze phallus with wings. It's a fashionum, the vendor explains cheerfully, for luck, protection, and fertility. You quietly place it back on the table, further down. A woman in a striped headscarf offers ointments made from goat fat and rose petals. She insists her balm cures dry skin, nightmares, and nosy neighbors. You're tempted. She also sells toothache paste, a crusty substance rumored to contain bits of crushed emerald. Emeralds, she says, repel evil and dentists alike. Your stomach grumbles. You haven't eaten anything solid since that one overly salted olive. So you stop at a food stall lit by a single torch and try your luck. First up, dormice. They're a delicacy here, plump little rodents stuffed with nuts and honey, then roasted. You hesitate. You chew. You reconsider your life choices. Surprisingly, it's not terrible. Sort of like eating a very ambitious meatball. Next, a patina layered dish made from eggs, leeks, and mystery meat topped with fish sauce. Romans loved their fish sauce, or garum, an ancient condiment made by fermenting fish guts in the sun. It's salty, pungent, and smells like someone buried an anchovy in a sauna. You gulp it down, grateful that your sense of smell is already fading. You sip some warm spiced wine to rinse your palate, but it only makes things weirder. The vendor swears it contains cinnamon, pepper, and a dash of ground oyster shell. Good for dreams, he promises. Also arthritis. A child offers you a plum soaked in vinegar. You accept, then spend the next few minutes puckering like a startled statue at a corner stall. A young boy is grinding herbs with a stone pestle. His mother sits beside him, fanning a pot of strange-smelling broth. They're apothecaries in training, and their shelves overflow with everything from crushed beetles to dried lizard tails. You overhear a recipe for curing hiccups that involves tying a piece of red coral to your left ankle while humming the name of your favorite emperor. You imagine Augustus would disapprove. The market is also a place of rumors. A pine nut tart. You hear two old men gossiping about a senator who allegedly paid a fortune for a cow that could predict eclipses. Only problem, one mutters, the cow was blind. They laugh. Somewhere the cow probably laughs too. You browse a table of scrolls and wax tablets. One features a crude cartoon of a gladiator with a flower for a helmet. Another contains a love poem so bad it could stop a chariot in its tracks. Poetry, you realize, was a popular trade good here, often as personal as a text message, and just as embarrassing when intercepted. A local doctor hawks remedies from a cart pulled by an extremely disinterested donkey. He waves a jar of what he claims is elephant marrow mixed with saffron. A woman next to you buys some without blinking. You pretend to be fascinated by a basket of lentils until he's out of earshot as you make your way toward the market's edge. Crowds thin and the sounds soften. A group of children run by, giggling, their cheeks stained with berry juice. An old man snoozes beside a pile of cabbages, snoring gently into the leafy greens. Just when you think the night can't get any stranger, a hooded woman motions you over. She points to a tiny glass vial containing a thick, yellowish liquid. Lions. Bile, she says. You blink. For what? Anything you want, she whispers. You back away slowly. On the final row of stalls, you spot something more familiar. A pile of lemons, baskets of almonds, and a cheerful baker selling honey cakes shaped like birds. You buy one and bite in. It's flaky, sweet, and blessedly mouse-free. Finally, a win. You sit on a nearby crate, watching the city pulse around you. Oil lamps flicker. Merchants pack up. Cats prowl under tables. A boy chases a goose. The goose seems largely unimpressed. Somewhere behind you, a man sneezes. Someone yells blessings of Jupiter, and for other people sneeze in response. You're not sure if it's a ritual or a pollen thing. One last sight catches your eye, a wooden stall, almost hidden behind a tapestry. Inside, a woman whispers to a curious crowd about ancient Egyptian medicine. She waves papyrus scrolls and promises cures for heartbreak, tooth rot, and haunting dreams. Historians still debate, she says, whether these remedies came from divine wisdom or just really desperate experimentation. You nod. That sounds about right. You rise, full in belly and brain. The market is closing. The torches grow dim. City exhales. And somewhere, someone's probably still sipping mouse wine. You follow the soft flow of the dispersing marketplace crowd toward something louder, dear, and far more chaotic. The amphitheater. Not the Grand Colosseum in Rome, but still sizable, and the excitement in the air feels the same, buzzing, unfiltered, and slightly unhinged. As you approach, a vendor thrusts a skewer toward your face, roasted chickpeas, and what he promises is eel sausage. You politely decline and duck past a group of teenagers painted with red chalk, cheering wildly. Their tunics are stained with wine and ambition. It's not even the main event yet. The amphitheater looms like a sun-baked skeleton of arches and shadows. You join the masses filing in merchants, bakers, beggars, nobles, and every social class in between. The seating is ruthlessly hierarchical. The elite gets stone benches with cushions and shade. You get a splintery plank and an elbow in the ribs from a man who seems to have brought his entire extended family. The crowd chatters with anticipation. Nearby, a woman sells candied nuts. Another offers wine in cracked pottery cups. A child beside you holds what looks suspiciously like a roasted bird on a stick, its tiny feet still attached. Suddenly, trumpets blare. You flinch. The games are beginning. Today's entertainment isn't just blood sport, it's a full spectacle, starting with a mock naval battle. Somehow the stage has been partially flooded and tiny boats drift across the shallow basin crewed by men in papier, MCH helmets pretending to drown. One bumps into another and both capsize dramatically. The crowd cheers. A child yells, "Drown him again," and throws an olive pit. You wonder if the guy in the boat is rethinking his career. The next act, trained animals. A bear in a feathered hat rides a pony in slow, confused circles. The audience laughs. You're not sure if you should, but the bear does seem oddly into it. Following that, a procession of exotic animals marches past leashed leopards, twitchy ostriches, even what appears to be a rather cranky badger. Historians still argue whether this part of the show was meant to educate or just give the audience something weird to talk about over dinner. Now come the gladiators. The crowd swells, the drums pound, and the gates creak open. Two men step out, one tall and lean with a curved sword, the other stocky with a heavy net and trident. You've read about these types. Retiarius versus Secutor, a classic matchup. The net wielder lunges, and for a moment, it's like watching a deadly dance rehearsal. You find yourself holding your breath not out of fear, but curiosity. The tall one dodges, rolls, and swipes. His opponent tangles the net around his leg, but then stumbles, missing the follow-up jab. The fight lasts only minutes, ending with both men panting and the net trailing like spaghetti behind them. The referee, a man in striped sandals, declares it a draw. The crowd groans, but no one dies, which, in ancient Rome, counts as a happy ending. A seller walks by with a basket. Labeled gladiator snacks. You peek in. Dried figs, small loaves, and something labeled eel jerky. You pass again, not ready to trust seafood after sunset. The next act, more bizarre than brutal, involves a blindfolded dwarf trying to catch a chicken in a ring of fire. You don't know what's happening? You don't think the chicken does? Either. But everyone's screaming with laughter, and even the chicken seems to accept its strange fate. You lean back and gaze up at the massive canvas awning stretched over parts of the amphitheater. It's a marvel of engineering sails rigged to block the sun and occasionally used to drop flower petals or scented water onto the audience. Today it drops a cloud of rose dust. You sneeze. The man beside you applauds. Between acts, there's a trivia contest. You're not joking. A local noble sponsors it, tossing coins to anyone who can answer questions about Roman history. The man with the elbow problem shouts Carthage to every question and somehow wins twice. Then a small stage is wheeled in. In a troupe of masked actors begins a pantomime of Odysseus battling sea monsters while also doing his taxes. It's both accurate and deeply absurd. You catch yourself smiling. One actor forgets his lines and improvises by miming being eaten by a squid. The squid costume, just two tunics sewn together with wiggling sandals, draws thunderous applause as night deepens. The amphitheater dims slightly. Torches flicker along the walls, casting dancing shadows across the sand-streaked stage. The finale is something everyone's been whispering about: a trained elephant reciting lines from Virgil, or so the rumor goes. What actually appears is a mildly distracted elephant led in by two nervous teenagers. One reads the lines while the elephant waves its trunk in something resembling rhythm. The crowd goes wild. You're not sure if it's for the poetry or just relief that no one got trampled. You glance around. Laughter echoes. Breadcrumbs. Litter tunics. Someone has fallen asleep on his neighbor's lap, snoring faintly. The amphitheater, despite its chaos, blood, and bear riding, isn't just about violence. It's spectacle. It's shared experience. It's Roman entertainment as therapy. Loud, strange, guaranteed to make your own problems feel smaller. As the crowd shuffles out, someone throws a half-eaten pear. It misses your head by inches. A woman behind you mutters about barbarians. In good sandals, you nod in sympathy. Outside, the night has cooled. You inhale deeply. The air still holds traces of roasted meat, sweat, and sawdust. Two drunk senators stumble past you, still arguing about whether the chicken or the dwarf won that round. You chuckle to yourself. Somehow in this amphitheater of chaos, you found something resembling peace. You don't get far from the amphitheater before hearing it, a boisterous din that rises over the rooftops like the city's heartbeat at dusk. You follow the sound like a moth to a candelabra, your sandals brushing over uneven cobblestones still. Warm from the sun, it's time for the real blood sport of Roman life. Politics. You turn a corner and nearly trip over a pack of street orators. One is standing on a wooden crate, arms flailing dramatically, debating grain prices with the kind of passion most people reserve for love poems or street brawls. A small crowd has gathered, nodding, shaking their heads, or just snacking loudly. While watching the rhetorical gladiators go at it, you keep moving, drawn toward the Curia Julia, the Senate House. You won't be going inside, obviously. That's strictly for the old, the powerful, and those wearing togas, expensive enough to have their own travel slaves. But politics in Rome doesn't need walls. It spills out onto every step and fountain in sight, just outside the building. Two senators argue over a proposed aqueduct project. One waves a scroll aggressively, the other just waves his wine cup. Their assistants, wearing coordinated sashes, whisper gossip behind them. You pause to listen. Something about a bribe involving fish sauce and a marble bust.
Nice.
You're not entirely sure if the bust was paid for or bribed. A man nearby offers you a cabbage. You decline, but he presses it into your hand anyway and winks. From Senator Flaccus, vote with your stomach, friend. You realize you've just received a political bribe. In cabbage form, historians still argue whether such edible bribes were symbolic, practical, or simply a sneaky way to avoid coin tracking laws. But here you are, holding leafy evidence of ancient campaign finance. You move toward the rostra, the raised platform where the heavyweights deliver their rants. One man in an oversized toga climbs up and immediately begins complaining about public toilets. Loudly. In detail. He gestures so wildly that his scroll flies off and hits a passerby in the head. Applause erupts. You're unsure whether it's for the speech or the accidental assault. Politics here is loud, but it's also performative. Senators don't just debate. They perform moral superiority with all the flair of trained actors. You spot one orator, dramatically kissing his ring every time he mentions the Republic, and another who punctuates every sentence by lifting a chicken feather aloft. Possibly symbolic, possibly lunch. You glance down an alleyway where a quieter political moment unfolds. Two wealthy men murmur over a wax tablet, nodding toward a younger man nearby, likely arranging support for his election run, or perhaps buying off opposition. It's hard to tell in a city where ambition comes gift-trapped in poetry and sabotage. As you meander through the forum, you realize politics here is like public theater, with slightly more shouting and significantly more olives. A man near the Temple of Saturn starts chanting anti-tax slogans. A few people join in, then someone hands out free cheese. The crowd disperses almost immediately. Cheese always wins. You sit briefly on the edge of a fountain, watching a boy try to spell his father's name on a campaign wall using charcoal and misspelling all of it. Nearby, a group of scribes argue over what counts as official voting records, one of them angrily brandishing a pigeon feather. Overhead, dusk deepens into night. Torches are lit one by one, their glow turning the marble facades of government. Buildings a soft gold, shadows flicker across stone senators and stern gods. Someone's playing a lyre off in the distance. The gentle twang seems out of place in all this thunderous democracy. Back near the Senate steps, group of ex-consuls, gray-haired, Gravel voice tremulous loudly about the good old days when elections were rigged with class and people accepted bribes with dignity. One snorts. Now they ask for cash and figs. No respect. You try not to laugh, but they sound like every retiree at every bus stop in history. Someone bumps into you. A boy carrying scrolls taller than himself, panting from a long run. Important message for Senator Crispus. He wheezes. The scroll falls open mid-sprint, revealing nothing but a crude drawing of what you assume is a donkey fighting a tax collector. Political satire? You realize Rome's finest. You wander past campaign posters scratched into walls, stylized names, slogans, and the occasional caricature. Vote for Katahi only slightly robs you. At least they're honest. As you continue along the forum's edge, a debate erupts over military funding. It ends. Not in violence, but with both parties agreeing to meet later over wine and diced pork. Because in Rome, even arguments have an appetite. Still, tension lingers like smoke in the cooling air. You pass a statue that's been vandalized with the phrase, "Who watches the watchman?" It's etched in Latin. Some things, it seems, never change. You pause one last time, watching a small group of young men rehearse a political comedy, skit complete with togas, made from curtains and sandals borrowed from their mothers. One slips midline and knocks over a prop column. Everyone laughs. Even a nearby senator lets out a begrudging chuckle. And you smile too? For all its chaos, bribery, and feather-waving nonsense, Roman politics is nothing if not human. Flawed, dramatic, but also strangely endearing as you rise to leave. You hear someone mutter, "The Republic's in good hands if they don't drop it." You tuck the cabbage bribe under your arm. You never voted for Senator Flaccus, but hey, waste not, want not. You're still chewing on that slightly wilted cabbage, out of curiosity more than hunger, when an invitation reaches you. It's in the form of a boy with wild hair and a tunic that's clearly seen better centuries. You're invited, he pants. To the domus of Gaius Petronius Maximus. He hands you a small clay token bearing a dolphin stamped into its surface and vanishes before you can ask. What's on the menu? You've heard whispers of this guy. Petronius is one of those nouveau-rich types, wealthy, little flashy, with a fondness for strange food and stranger company. His dinner parties are rumored to involve live musical performances, illusionists, and once, a trained monkey that served wine poorly. Tonight promises something memorable. You make your way through the Esquiline district, where Domus houses stretch wide and low behind high walls. Petronius' home is lit like a beacon, its gate flanked by 2 oil lamps in the shape of sphinxes. A doorman greets you without words, inspecting your clay token like it might explode. Inside the atrium is already buzzing. Think of it like a Roman red carpet. All eyes, all pretense, all chatter. Rich folks recline lazily on cushioned couches, sipping watered wine and gossiping between bites of stuffed dormouse. Yes, dormouse, which tastes oddly like nutmeg and guilt. You catch a glimpse of a woman wearing golden sandals and a gown stitched with what looks like real pearls. She's laughing at a joke you're fairly certain wasn't actually funny. A slave hands you a towel for wiping your hands, and another offers you a tiny morsel of fish wrapped in fig leaf. You take it. It's warm and wiggling. A delicacy. They say, you shuffle toward the triclinium, the formal dining room where the real feast begins. Low tables are arranged in a U-shape, surrounded by plush couches where guests lounge like overfed cats. You find a spot next to a balding man who smells faintly of wine, sandalwood, and what might be anchovy paste. The host, Petronius himself, enters with theatrical flair. He's draped in scarlet, his arms jingling with more bracelets than the average temple goddess. Tonight, he proclaims, we dine like Neptune himself. You hope this doesn't involve seafood-flavored wine again? The first course arrives, oysters served in marble shells, followed by boiled flamingo tongue. You hesitate, but peer pressure is powerful, and the flamingo is surprisingly not bad. Slightly chewy, a bit like duck. Duck had woken up regretting its life choices. Between bites, your neighbor tells you about his newest investment, renting out parrots that recite poetry at funerals. Got bill. You nod politely and immediately reconsider. All your life decisions. Entertainment follows. A man with painted eyebrows plays the double flute while balancing a ceramic goose on his head. Applause erupts. Then, the main course, a massive eel presented on a silver platter, garnished with pomegranate seeds and, for reasons no one explains, tiny rose petals. The eel is announced by a boy who sings a short poem about its tragic life and glorious seasoning. You try a piece, it tastes like regret mixed with cinnamon. Someone makes a pun about eel feelings. Laughter. You die a little inside. As the wine flows freely, conversations grow both louder and more incoherent. A woman begins debating whether the moon is a goddess or just a light in the sky. A man across from you insists he once arm-wrestled a Vestal virgin. Politely, he adds, "You're not sure what that means?" Petronius claps his hands. Time for the surprise. The room hushes. Two slaves enter with a covered dish. They remove the lid with a flourish to reveal dancing eels, alive, on a shallow tray of warm water. They slither and swirl under colored oils. While a lyre player strums something vaguely aquatic, historians still argue whether these eel performances were real or exaggerated by later writers. No, but you are currently watching what might be history's oddest floor show. One eel leaps and flops onto the table. Screams, laughter, applause. Petronius howls with joy and downs his entire cup of wine. Dessert is honeyed locusts and cakes shaped like Saturn's rings. The sweetness is a welcome change. But you can't stop glancing at the eel still wriggling near your plate. Later, someone reads tragic poetry aloud, but everyone's too drunk or distracted by their own cleverness to care. You join a small group reclining under a fresco of Dionysus. You quietly listen to a whispered argument about whether Julius Caesar wore socks. You're not sure if the food or the conversation has left you more dazed. Eventually, the feast wanes. People nap openly on couches, their togas half unraveled, crumbs clinging to their cheeks. Someone snores under a statue of Apollo. The eel has disappeared, escaped. Eaten, promoted. You wander out, stuffed and bewildered. Rome, you realize, doesn't just do excess, it marinates in it, then flams it. Then invites 30 people to watch it dance. Outside, the cool night air wraps around you like a much-needed reality check. You walk slowly, your stomach gurgling uncertainly. Somewhere in the distance, another party's lyre music drifts through the breeze. You suspect it involves juggling chickens. Maybe you'll go tomorrow, but for now, you carry the weight of too many grapes, too much flamingo, and the ghost of a dancing eel. You're waddling slightly from the feast, more eel than man at this point, when your foot catches on a cobblestone and your brain suddenly remembers something crucial. You're in love. Or at least infatuated enough to attempt writing Roman poetry, which, honestly, should be declared a crime punishable by fig shortage. She lives near the Subura, a densely packed district teeming with insulae, taverns, and the vague smell of fermented olives. Her name? Let's say Livia, a merchant's daughter with opinions sharper than a gladius and eyebrows that could raise the dead. You saw her once at the Forum, arguing the price of wool like a senator on trial. Naturally, you fell head over sandals, so now, under the spell of wine and self-delusion, you've decided it's the perfect moment to deliver your best love note yet. Not on parchment ordinary, not carved in marble too heavy. You opt for tradition, a wax tablet with a carefully etched poem, alliterative and slightly off meter, but heartfelt. By the flickering glow of an oil lamp, you draft lines about her eyes being brighter than Vulcan's forge and her voice sweeter than honeyed garum. It's probably the worst poem written since Nero's last public recital. But at least you didn't include a metaphor about goats this time, with laurel wreath slightly askew and the kind of confidence only fermented fruit can provide. To her street, you pass sleeping beggars, scuttling cats, and a man selling roasted chestnuts to absolutely no one. The Subura never truly sleeps, it just mutters in its sleep. Her building looms. Ahead, 5 stories of creaking timber and paper-thin walls. You squint upward, guessing which shutter might belong to her. A small light flickers on the 3rd floor. A sign? Or just someone forgetting to extinguish their oil lamp? You weigh your options: climbing, foolish, shouting, rude, sending a messenger. Boy, at this hour, it's dangerous and probably sticky, so you settle on the classic method. You tie the wax tablet to a pomegranate, romantic and biodegradable. Aim for the open window and toss its sails. It soars. Ato no, it smacks a passing fruit vendor squarely on the head. Curses in Latin so vulgar it could peel paint. Your poem now sticky with crushed pomegranate juice, stomped beneath a sandal. You retreat. Fast you duck into a shadowed alley, cursing your own poetic ambition. From somewhere above, a giggle, you look up. There she is, Livia, watching. From her window, arms folded, amusement dancing in her eyes. Next time she calls softly, use better metaphors. You melt into your toga. Somewhere inside your skull, a chorus of tiny senators applauds ironically. Later, in a tavern not far from humiliation, you sip lukewarm posca and lick your wounds. A man beside you is missing 3 teeth and claims he lost them to a jealous husband. Poetry, he slurs, is blood sport in this town. You nod. Solemnly and quietly hide your stylus. The barkeep, a woman with forearms like a legionnaire, offers unsolicited advice. If you want a girl's attention, try a sandal, repair kit, or a good fish. You jot that down just in case. Historians still argue whether romantic gestures in ancient Rome were sweet or stupid. Ovid claimed art was the key to seduction. Catullus preferred anguish. You're starting to lean toward the sandal kit. As you sit in the corner, trying not to dwell on your sticky defeat, you notice other would-be lovers scattered through the tavern. Young man with ink-stained fingers composing a sonnet on a napkin. A girl carving initials into a table with surprising intensity. It's an old man reminiscing loudly about the time he seduced a Vestal virgin with goat cheese. Ah, romance in Rome. It's messy. It's public. It occasionally involves poultry. You make your way home under the increasingly sleepy city. Streets have quieted, save for the occasional whisper of wind through laundry lines and the creak of wooden beams settling in for the night. Somewhere, a lyre player is plucking a love song for coins. As you pass Livia's street again, you glance up. Her window is closed now, but the candle flickers just once before going dark. Maybe that was a sign. Or maybe she just ran. Out of oil either way, you'll need a better plan next time. Definitely fewer pomegranates. The next morning, the city wakes with a groan. Somewhere, a rooster crows late, perhaps hungover from the same party you were attend. A donkey brays indignantly as a merchant nudges his cart through the early bustle. You emerge from your insula, blinking like a cave bat. The sunlight much too bright for your dignity. You've decided to recover from last night's romantic disaster by doing something wholesome and productive. So naturally, you head to the Thermae the Roman public baths. Now, don't picture candlelit spas with cucumber water. Picture instead a social arena soaked in steam, sweat, and ambition. You pay a small entry fee, hand your sandals and tunic to a bored-looking attendant. Step into the frigidarium, a room so cold your skin practically retracts into your bones. Good for the circulation, says a man with a beard like a helmet strap, slapping his own chest. The bathhouse is alive, with chatter and splashes. Philosophers argue about whether water can be political. Senators mutter about the grain supply. A poet rehearses lines to himself while vigorously exfoliating with a strigil. There are slaves scrubbing backs, children playing tag between pools, and a man in the corner selling boiled eggs from a wooden box. You head next to the tepidarium, the warm room, and breathe deeply. The air is thick with eucalyptus oil and the faint whiff of ambition. 2 men near you are discussing campaign strategies for the next edile election. One suggests bribing voters with free walnuts. They remember the nuts, he says solemnly. You try not to eavesdrop, but it's impossible. The bath is where Rome really happens, not in the forum, not in the Senate. Deals are struck, rumors traded, alliances forged, all while wearing absolutely nothing but sweat. You glide into the caldarium, the hot room, and immediately feel like a poorly seasoned stew. Steam billows around you, fogging everything into soft blurs. Somewhere nearby, someone's arguing over whether Achilles or Alexander had better abs. You think it's a draw? A heavy-set man next to you starts humming a funeral dirge. Relaxing, he explains. You lie on a warm stone bench and let the heat melt your regrets. You hear someone mention that Pliny the Elder recommends 3 types of bath salts for melancholy: salt of tears, salt of the earth, and salt of old goats, he says. You make a mental note to stick with soap. A slave offers to oil your back and scrape your skin with a curved blade, standard Roman hygiene. You accept, though the sensation is like being sanded down by a very polite carpenter. The oil smells of herbs, lemon, possibly disappointment. Historians still argue whether Roman baths were more about cleanliness or status. Sure, you came to wash off yesterday's eel-infused shame, but you also came to be seen. Not alone, in the palestra, the open-air exercise yard attached to the baths, half-naked men wrestle, toss medicine balls, or feign interest in stretching. A group of young nobles discuss wine preferences while lazily lifting weights the size of loaves of bread. One of them notices you watching and offers a wink. You pretend you are admiring the architecture. You slip back inside, grab a boiled egg, which is far too hot, and return to the frigidarium for a final plunge. The water is glacial, shocking you back into full consciousness and out of your existential spiral, feeling vaguely purified. You dry off with a towel that smells faintly of vinegar and olive oil, retrieve your tunic, now suspiciously damp, and step outside. The sun has risen fully, and so has the city's noise level. As you wander toward the Forum, it's newly oiled and debatably cleaner, you realize something. Bathhouses aren't just about scrubbing. They're microcosms of Rome itself. Loud, chaotic, oddly fragrant, and full of half-truths shouted over boiling water. You pass a graffiti-covered wall on your way out. One reads, "I bathed with Marcus. Never again." Another says, "The water is cleaner than your politics." A third simply reads, "Lucia was here, and so was Flavius." You chuckle, then glance up just in time to see a familiar silhouette disappear around a corner. Livia. Maybe you jog to catch up, nearly slipping on olive pits. But when you reach the spot, she's gone. Instead, there's a small fig placed carefully on the edge of a windowsill. You pluck it, amused. Is it a message? A snack? A metaphor? In Rome, it might be all 3. You bite into it, sweet. Definitely better than eel. You stroll through the city now with a spring in your step and fig juice on your fingers, feeling oddly renewed. Between last night's poetic catastrophe and this morning's bathhouse diplomacy, you've somehow reached equilibrium, a rare thing in Rome, where most people are either plotting, running late, or being robbed. As you pass under a triumphal arch, you hear distant fanfare. A small parade is making its way through the street, not a triumph for a victorious general, but something smaller. A local guild celebrating the opening of a new mosaic studio. There are banners, flutes, and a man dressed as a dolphin for some reason. You'd stop and applaud. It's Rome. Dolphins happen. You take a detour toward the Janiculum Hill, hoping for a little peace. The climb is steep, but the view is worth it. Rome sprawls below like a marble and clay tapestry. Red tile roofs shimmer in the heat, aqueducts slice across the horizon, and the Tiber glints like a slow-moving dagger. A breeze catches your tunic. You sit on a crumbling wall and watch as the city lives its endless rhythm. Carts clatter, pigeons argue, children chase each other past columns older than memory. You find yourself thinking again about how it all works. How this city, with its contradictions and chaos, actually holds together. Historians still argue whether Rome's glue was fear, money, culture, or just a very persistent set of aqueducts below. A woman balances a basket of live geese on her head while shouting something that may or may not be Latin. A man plays a panpipe for a dog wearing a laurel crown. Senator argues with his own reflection in a shop window. And yet, despite it all, the place hums. It breathes. It functions, improbably, like a machine powered by figs and shouting, as the sun arcs toward the west. You decide to walk along the river. The Tiber's banks are lined with reed sellers, jugglers, and men who insist they invented bread. You spot a fisherman with a net full of very suspicious-looking eels. You keep your distance. Eventually, your steps lead you toward one of your favorite oddities, an alley rumored to house a secret bookstore. Doesn't have a sign, just a scratched drawing of a scroll on a wooden shutter. You knock. Nothing. You knock again, in rhythm this time. The door creaks open, revealing a woman with ink-stained hands and a smirk. Looking for poetry or scandal? She asks. Both, you reply. She lets you in. The room is musty, crammed with scrolls, tablets, and whispered gossip. You pick through titles. Dorico Quinaria, a cookbook featuring dormice. The Lost Tragedies of Achaeus, and something in Greek that might be extremely illegal. Wow. You settle on a slim volume of satirical poems and hand over to bronze coins and a moderately convincing smile. Back outside, you wander toward the Aventine. This neighborhood is quieter, fewer chariots, more birdsong. You find yourself at a small shrine dedicated to household spirits. You light a tiny oil lamp and whisper a thank you not to any god in particular, but to the city itself. For not eating you alive today, for letting you toss poems and eat figs and escape eel-related doom Rome gives and takes after all. Day you're throwing pomegranates at windows, the next you're being offered contraband. Scrolls in a mystery shop. Balance. You watch the shadows stretch as twilight begins to roll in like soft wool. The breeze smells of lavender and charcoal. You pass a baker pulling flatbread from a clay oven, the crust hissing with olive oil. You buy one. It's warm, crusty, and absurdly satisfying. You share a piece with a passing cat. The streets begin to glow. Torches flicker to life. Lamps are lit inside homes, casting golden rectangles onto cobblestones. Music starts somewhere. Flute, a soft drum. You pause at a fountain, letting the cool water run over your hands. Another day survived. Another story added to the city's endless mosaic. You head home slowly, letting the rhythm of the city soothe you. You know, tomorrow will bring something new: a Senate scandal, K-chariot crash, another attempt to win Livia over with fewer fruit-based tactics. But for now, there's calm. At your door, a note waits. Folded simply, no wax seal. You open it, one line scrawled in charcoal. Better metaphors. Try again, no figs this time. Your heart does something awkward. You smile. The sky darkens. Rome hums, and in the little upstairs room of your insula, you sit by candlelight, with a stylus in hand, ready to try again. Maybe not a poem. Maybe just a story. Word count. 1057 wind down. 300 words. The candle burns low now, casting soft golden ripples on the wall. Outside, Rome murmurs in its sleep pan. Occasional footstep, the distant bark of a dog, the creak of shutters closing. You're back in your little room, wrapped in the comfort of blankets that smell faintly of crushed lavender and old parchment. Your stylus lies idle. The scrolls are tucked away. Somewhere across the city, Livia might be reading by lamplight or sleeping, or perhaps watching the stars with a knowing smile. You let the thought float away like steam in a bath. The air is still and warm. The stone walls hold onto the day's heat, slowly releasing it into the quiet night. You feel your breath slow, your body soften. The weight of the city has slipped off your shoulders. No need to impress. No need to chase or fix or prove anything. Just you. In silence. In the sleepy rhythm of a world much older than your worries. Maybe tomorrow you'll write the perfect line. Maybe you won't. Maybe the eels will finally be edible, or your sandal won't break, or the bath will be quiet for once. But for now, none of that matters. You're safe. You're still. You've wandered through the streets of ancient Rome and made it back with stories to tell. Laughter shared and a fig-shaped bruise on your pride. Let your breath grow long. Let your mind drift like the Tiber, slow and sure and silver in the moonlight. Let sleep take over your home.